Welcome to the CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar, where we share insights at the intersection of talent and revenue. Dive into a unique narrative with our hosts, Michelle Strasburger, the insightful CHRO, and Dominique Sanfleur, the visionary CXO. Together, they bring dynamic perspectives that ignite thought-provoking dialogue from the C-suite. Each week, join us for electrifying sessions that confront the very challenges modern CXOs navigate in today's fast-paced business landscape. When split-second decisions loom, must it be talent or revenue that takes the hit? Or is there a harmonious crossroad where both can thrive? Can we blur the lines between talent and revenue? In every episode, we provide executive leaders with 3 strategic takeaways, transformative insights that will propel you to master the delicate balance between people and profit. It's not about winners or losers, but crafting an environment where everyone triumphs. Tune in and step closer to redefining executive success.
Hey, hey.
We are here. I might be having an error on LinkedIn, so we'll see. But
All
it's
right.
live on YouTube,
There we
so
go.
we might have to transfer it over. But we're live at the bar.
We are.
It doesn't get any better than this, and we have a special guest today, so I'm very excited. I am Michelle Strasburger. I'm the CEO of HR Rebooted. I have a little cold today, so I'm sounding a little off. But we are a fractional CHRO group that works with CEOs of fast-growing tech companies to help them scale and build intentional cultures so they can grow without losing their soul. And I have Dominique here.
And I'm Dominique. I'm the CEO of Intramark. We create a data layer on culture to help organizations identify hidden risks like unwanted turnover and productivity gaps. And we have a special guest today. Michelle, do you want to tee it off to
I'm
Rachel?
very, very excited to welcome not only a very special guest, but a very good friend of mine, Rachel Weeks. Rachel?
Thank you so much for having me. As we say, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
There we
So
go.
this is appropriate that we are walking into a bar virtually. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm currently the Chief Marketing Officer at Dogs Vacant Property Security, but I've spent a long time in my career as a marketing leader in HR tech companies. So HR people and HR tech is dear to my heart, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to be part of today's conversation.
We're glad to have you, Rachel.
Thanks.
Very excited to be here. So we were talking about leading with recognition and rewards. And so let's start with why that's important. Why is that important that we really focus on recognition and rewards?
Well, I'll start off by saying, first of all, I like to focus on recognition and appreciation, which then lead to rewards. So, we're all human beings. Everyone likes positive feedback. Everyone likes being told that they did a good job when they've worked really hard at something. And it's not just the, personal human aspect of it, but the data shows that people who are recognized at work are more likely to stay in their jobs. They're more likely to not seek, employment elsewhere. And so it helps from a retention perspective. People who are recognized and they feel appreciated are willing to go and above and beyond, what may be, the narrow scope of their responsibilities or, something outside of what they might typically be responsible for. So there are a lot of, really measurable business value points that go along with showing recognition and appreciation, but we can do it by leading, just from the humanness of us all and thinking about, how people like to receive feedback.
Rachel, when I think about, and thanks for sharing that. One thing that comes to mind, or a question that comes to mind, is what is the difference? How do we define recognition versus, appreciation? To me, it sounds pretty similar, right? If I recognize someone, I'm appreciating of them. Can I appreciate someone I'm not recognizing, or vice versa? What are the two buckets for that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I think you can appreciate someone without recognizing them. And that might mean that the person doesn't know that they're appreciated. So that's where, it comes down to communication and, really being able to, whether it's vocalize or verbalize or, somehow demonstrate that you appreciate this person publicly. And that's where companies can, drive recognition and reward programs that enable their employees to show appreciation in ways that, maybe have a little bit of structure and a little bit of definition behind them, because it's an actual, initiative within the company.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that initiative, we talked about this as we were preparing on Tuesday, that initiative has to start at the executive level. It has to be an initiative at the executive level and not an HR initiative. So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, 100%. Culture is driven from the top of every organization. And so what types of behaviors, a company expects employees to exhibit, whether they're aligned with specific values that the company has, or, just the general nature of the culture, that is going to be emulated by the leader at the top of the food chain, who's the CEO. It's going to filter down to the rest of the C-level, through the rest of the management, to all, of the employees in the company. So if a company says, that they have values that, they expect employees to live by, or that they, base the foundation of their culture on, then I 100% expect, leadership to live those values and lead by example. So that's one place to start, from a recognition program, is that, a CEO, a leader says, we can get higher productivity, better retention rates, maybe even better talent acquisition rates, because we have a strong culture and we live and believe in all these values. And that, directly impacts growth. You turn over employees, you're not going to be growing in a positive direction, because everybody knows how long it takes and costs to fill and backfill and re-ramp and all of those things. So again, to your original point, Michelle, if it starts at the top and it filters down, then it really establishes the culture that, everyone in the company, hopefully is living by. And that's a really great foundation for launching a recognition and reward program.
I also think it helps too if it's just an HR initiative, it's just kind of pushed off to the side, because then all the other teams are focused on their initiatives, and marketing is focused and sales are focused on driving revenue. And so HR is coming in and going like, you have to recognize your people, and we've got this program, and remember you, and then it loses the intention. Mm-hmm. And it loses the effect, and it's then leaders are like, all right, well, HR said I have to give you this recognition, so here's the gift card so I can show HR I'm doing it, and it doesn't have the same effect it would have. Like when you and I worked together at Healthcare Source, it really was a partnership of like, how do we make sure that we are driving this culture through the organization? Because we were both we both had this as a goal in the organization, to make sure we were working on this together. And I think that's key when the leadership team has cohesive goals in an organization, because then they're working on it together and they have the same goals instead of competing priorities.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It was a CEO-led initiative that marketing and HR together had goals to achieve, rolling out the values to the organization. What was the branding going to be? What was the communication plan going to be? How is it all going to be rolled out, introduced to employees via onboarding, all of those things. But what I also remember, and what's also really important when a company is going to roll out any type of, values or recognition-driven program, is that you get input from everyone across the company. And so, it's really important, which again, it has to be driven from leadership. So leadership has to support giving their people, whether they're on the engineering team or the customer success team or marketing or HR, they have to dedicate, the amount of time to the committee or the task force or, whatever it is you want to call it, so that they can provide input representing themselves and their team. Because some companies try really hard, to show recognition and appreciation. And, maybe they give you a $5 gift card to Starbucks. And you're thinking to yourself, $5? Like, is this how much you appreciate me? And by the way, I don't even drink coffee. So,
Mm.
maybe if there had been any type of discussion about, like, well, what about for people who don't like coffee? Or, is $5 really the appropriate value? Because how is that going to make people feel? You can get a lot out of these programs without making a significant, investment. But just think about, again, like the value of a $5 thing versus, a $50 thing. And like, that's meaningful. And companies, should be able to work out ways, do they have professional development budgets? Do they have, other programs to help support development, within the organization? This should be part of that, as well.
Rachel, that you hit on a word that I want to dig into, which is investment, right? I'm putting my CFO hat here, and thinking about the money. Now, I'm totally on board. I totally get it. But as a, let's if I put my CFO hat on, $50, I've got 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 15,000 employees. How do I think about ROI with this? How do I roll out, in partnership with you, roll out a recognition program, but I need to track the benefits? How do you help a CFO think about that? Especially when you're selling the budget to a CFO.
Yeah,
I hope that's a fair
absolutely.
question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most important thing to any type of program that's going to have a reward with a budget associated to it, you have to determine what KPIs you're going to measure. So, you're not necessarily going to measure, the $50. What was the ROI from Dom on Dom getting, a $50 gift card? But what was the overall ROI on your rate of turnover? You benchmark your rate of turnover, and every company has a target rate of turnover that they want to maintain, because there's healthy turnover, but then there's also unhealthy turnover. And if a company specifically is struggling with unhealthy turnover, then maybe that's something that they want to take a look at. So if you can benchmark, like, well, what's your turnover rate? And then over a period of time, you look at that KPI and you say, has our turnover rate gone down? Is our retention rate going up? Is our, another KPI might be tenure within the company. And, some companies think, it's great to give an employee, big reward when they reach their 5-year milestone or their 10-year milestone. But what's your turnover rate before employees reach 5 years? And how many opportunities were there to potentially recognize and reward those employees? And therefore, maybe they wouldn't have moved on prior to the 5-year mark in tenure. And this is where HR comes in. I mean, this is why typically, for any program to be successful, you have to have a leader, but you also have to have, again, it comes from the top. It's buy-in that all the executive leaders, are going to contribute the resources, because it's time, even if you're not putting budgetary dollars into it. Marketing's got to, dedicate design resources, and the committee is going to meet twice a month to discuss, what the communication plan is going to be. And, all of those things, they're money, but they're not budget per se. But HR is the function within the company that's responsible for measuring turnover and retention rates and vacancy rates and fill rates. How long does it take to fill a position? Maybe if you have better retention rates and you have a really strong culture, maybe you have faster time to fill rates, which means that you have higher productivity because you're hiring people sooner. So there's a lot of opportunities to measure the ROI based on KPIs of, really workforce management, right? Michelle, is that what you call it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they don't have to be big awards. Like we had a LinkedIn Live a few weeks ago, Dominique, where we were talking about how you can recognize somebody, even just a thank you sometimes goes a long way. And when we were at Healthcare Source, our CEO, he did the ABCD Awards, and he got the biggest charge out of these. And it was the Above and Beyond the Call of Duty Awards. And every month he would go to, back then, I think it was Newberry Comics, the store, and you got the silliest gifts that they were probably $5 or $10, but somebody recognized the rule was anybody could recognize anybody. And there was he and I would choose who would win the awards based upon the nomination. And he would go pick the gifts based upon the nomination and the gift tied to the nomination. So there would be like funky socks, bobbleheads, things like that. And people would get the biggest charge out of these gifts, and they would leave them on their desk, and then they become a talking point. Like somebody would come over to the desk and be like, oh my gosh, why do you have that silly bobblehead or that funky pen or whatever? And then people would talk about it. And so it just became a conversation piece in the thing. And it cost $5, but he would get excited about it. And people always looked forward to those. We would do them at the town halls, and people would always look forward to the ABCD awards just to see what people got, because they know he picked them out. Or I picked them out, and it was tied to the recognition, and it was going to be some kind of really silly, goofy gift. But that time went into it, and somebody actually took the time to recognize them for it.
I'm so glad you brought that up and just reminded me of that whole thing, because Peter, he got such a kick out of it. And, oftentimes it was the unsung heroes who were getting recognition, or, the quiet people who didn't get a lot of, publicity. But it was across the company, and it was really, really fun. And that's what feels good. And that's what feels good. And honestly, that feels better than a $5 gift card.
Yeah. And it was like a $5 pair of funky socks or a bobblehead or something.
Thought was put into it. It was bought for you personally. You got to keep it, obviously. And that reminds me of, I have to plug a book called Crave. It's by an author named Greg Lederman, and it's about giving people what they crave, which is making them feel good. And, what makes those, juices, feed in your brain to make you feel good. And in the book, super quick, easy read, he talks about a concept of 10 minutes by Friday. And all it is every week taking 10 minutes by Friday to recognize somebody or to recognize people. You can, whether you block it off on your calendar or not, but that's all it takes. And think about, in 10 minutes, you could send 1 or 2 really thoughtful emails about something that somebody did that you're really appreciative of, and how, you wanted to make sure that you knew that they were being recognized for the hard work. Or maybe you rattle off 20 emails, great job this week, love working with you. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a lot. But even taking 10 minutes out of your day, the person who receives that, it's so incredibly meaningful. And I've also always said, and this goes back, I worked with Greg at Reward Gateway, and Reward Gateway, in full transparency, has a reward and recognition platform. So, if you're a company that wants to make an investment, there are dozens and dozens of platforms out there. But of course, we used our own platform, but we also really lived the culture of recognizing people. And you can gamify it and do all sorts of fun things. But I felt like it was Christmas when I was giving recognition. It made me feel really good to publicly recognize, my teammates. So whether it's on a platform, whether it's via email or on a message board, or on Slack, you don't need a platform. We all have lots of ways we communicate technology. Or if you have an in-house, in-office culture and you're doing in-house town halls, that's a great way to do it. And there's nothing better than seeing the smiles on people's faces and the laughs that people get, when they get a gag gift. But also just knowing that when they receive that message, it's going to make them feel good. And then when it comes back to business, those are the people that are going to go above and beyond. Those are the people that are going to do the extra and go the extra mile to support the company and to support their teammates, because they know they feel appreciated for it.
I want to point out something that you had said, sorry, Dom, about making a point in your calendar to do that. I had a general manager, and he was very introverted and a quiet person. But if you ask anybody about him, they would say, oh, he was very social. He would come talk to me all the time. But that wasn't his style. And he would, every morning, he put a note in his calendar to go walk around the office and talk to people, because it wasn't his style. And I think, sometimes this doesn't come naturally to everybody. Recognition comes naturally to some of the people in HR and some people in marketing, right? That's just it's in our blood. but it doesn't come natural to everybody else. And so, you know, maybe building it into a practice or a process that you already have in place, like putting it in your calendar. Like he put it in his calendar to go walk around the office and say hi and good morning to people, because that just wasn't natural to him. And people thought that was just who he was, and recognized him for that. And
Well,
he was
I love that. Oh, excuse me. I love that about him, because he recognized that it was something that was important to the team and to the rest of the company, and that even though it was putting him outside his comfort zone, it was really meaningful. And I love that, because I can tell you, and again, we're referring to a lot of in-office culture stuff, which is kind of interesting. Of course, we're LinkedIn virtual right now, but the number of meaningful conversations that I had with executives, especially earlier in my career, because they would stop by my cube because someone else was standing there, or they would stop by my office door. One of my best office locations was, you came off the elevator and my door was the first one at the beginning of the hall, and the CEO's office was at the end of the hall. And I'm telling you, I got to know him because he stopped in my door when he got off the elevator on many, many mornings. And that made me feel really good, because he could have just walked on by, gone straight to his office in the corner and not done that. And I'm sure I'm not the only one he did that to, but it did so happen that my office was located in that really great location. I thought it was a great location. And that facilitated our relationship. And that was his leadership style as well. So I love that about being intentional, you know, back to your original point, Michelle. And I think with recognition and showing appreciation, sometimes you have to do that because you just forget. We all get so busy. Oh, thanks. And yeah, you say thanks in a really quick email or Slack or text or whatever. But you know, you're already moved on to the, you know, next many things. So when you have time blocked, or, you know, you have a specific task set for yourself to make sure that you do it, that can be, you know, really valuable to everybody.
Yep. Yeah, I know Dominique is chomping at the bit to say something, so I'm going to give him the floor.
I'm just biting my. I love this because you know, we touched on a few things, right? If I can recap a little bit. Recognition and appreciation, they can happen separately or together. You want to make sure that you have a cohesive plan or strategy or program that makes sure that they both happen. And if they're going to happen, there are some benefits, right? What we touched on that, you know, whether it be ROI coming from retention, just better culture, better hiring practices, more productivity, more trust. And basically acceleration within the organization. And what I'm picking up on is a few elements to make a program successful. Is that it's got to be meaningful, right? It's got to be something that doesn't need to be expensive, but it's got to be thoughtful, and it's got to be intentional, right? There's something. This doesn't come to your point, Michelle. This doesn't come naturally to everybody. You've got to put some effort. Is there two-part questions. Anything else that you want to make sure is part of a leader wants to make sure is part of a recognition and appreciation program? And also, are there things that you want to make sure are not, you know, explicitly you want to call out things to make sure you avoid that may seem good, but can have some unintended consequences as part of a program like this?
Well, I'm going to respond to that in a not exactly the question that you're asking me, but you know, like we've already said, this has to come directly from leadership. You know, leadership has to exhibit the behaviors that they want to see from the rest of their teams, which means, you know, they need to show recognition, whether it's through, you know, a quarterly awards program or, you know, a Slack channel or just sending emails, you know, to a group when somebody does a good thing. They should be emulating those behaviors. But sometimes I think leaders get caught up in the concern, well, I don't want to show favoritism. It's like, okay, I mean, that is a legitimate concern, but as a leader, that's something that you should be thinking about not doing all the time and not just when you're thinking about giving formal recognition. So, I mean, I guess that's something that I, you know, would think about is that, you know, if you need to think about if you as a leader don't feel comfortable recognizing employees for, going above and beyond, or just like, doing a really great job and acknowledging that, because you're afraid you're going to call somebody out, well, maybe you need to think about the dynamics on the team. Or maybe you need to think about, you have low performers on the team. Are you addressing them? Well, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't not recognize the high performers. It means that you need to do both, So I guess that's a pitfall that I've seen companies fear. And I would just caution to, really address from a different perspective.
That's actually super interesting. It did raise another quick question though. How do you, or how have you seen recognizing and appreciation for members of the organization that are not performing well? Like, how does that kind of gets a little tough, right? Because it's easy to recognize a high performer, but do you want, again, thinking about intentionality, how do you think about intentionality around someone who's not performing well at the
Well,
organization?
I think that you could have an entire separate session about performance management and how to address performance management and high performers, low performers, professional development, all of those things. And what's important to remember is that recognition is not performance management. And so they really need to be looked at as independent things. And that, if someone's a low performer, well, they're probably not getting recognized. And that's something that you as the manager should be aware of, and that you shouldn't be addressing it from the perspective of, well, let's see how to get this person more recognition. It's, well, let's see how to get this person more successful in their role so that they are being recognized. And so that's my perspective on that.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to touch on the favoritism piece too. So if you're worried about favoritism and then you don't recognize somebody because they've been recognized many times before and you worry about recognition, so you worry about favoritism, so then you pick somebody else because of that and you rotate, then you've watered down the program.
Mm-hmm.
So then you rotate. So that you've got to be intentional about that as well as you think about the program.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's also where, you want the recognition to be for a meaningful purpose. You're not going to send an email to the whole company, I don't know, hey, great week. You did all the emails you were supposed to do. Like, that in and of itself is watered down. Like, I mean, yes, everybody has responsibilities and KPIs that they're supposed to hit and tasks that they need to do to accomplish their jobs. It's really saving it for the meaningful moments. Congratulations on that campaign. All the different things that you put together made it successful. Here are the results that show what the success is. That's what you want to recognize. Culturally, you want to live by the values of the company every day. And you could certainly use the values of the company as a foundation for recognizing someone. I want to recognize you because you really lived the corporate value of supporting your team, or whatever the value is. And this is what you did, and this is why I'm recognizing you. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't be thinking about how they support their teams every day. Right? Mm-hmm. Nor should a manager recognize everybody for supporting their teams every day, because that's what that's what you're expected of as a teammate. But it's saving those recognition moments and then reward moments, even at a higher level, for those really special things and sincere accomplishments. Yeah,
absolutely. So we are at time. What is something that key thing you want to leave our listeners with?
I would just like to leave everybody with the message that, it only takes a few minutes every day to recognize people. And when people are recognized and they feel appreciated, it will make you feel good as well. And then they will go above and beyond. So, it's not for selfish purposes, but, it is a mutually fulfilling thing that you can do very, very easily that, has nothing but positive effects, in my opinion.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We did have a little bit of a glitch with the LinkedIn, but the full video is on YouTube. We'll make sure we get that out to everybody. And Rachel's contact information will be in the comments. So feel free to reach out to her if you do have questions on how to pursue a culture of recognition. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us. This was a great conversation.
Thanks for
Absolutely.
having me. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Rachel.
Take care.
Thank you, Neha, for your help in the background.
Thank you, Neha.
You've just experienced another episode of The CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar, where we share insights at the intersection of talent and revenue. Thank you for joining us. Please join us next week at noon Eastern for more strategic content to help you scale your business. You can follow us on LinkedIn and on YouTube for additional content or episodes you may have missed. The links will be in the comments section. If you'd like more information or to schedule time with Michelle or Dominique, follow the link in the comments section to book time on their calendar. Until next week, cheers.